So I was thinking today, one of the things I say to my son all the time, maybe more than anything, is, if he's whining or if he's complaining about something, to stop. And I tell him to stop. And often what I'll tell him is like, listen, I get it. You could be sad. You could be angry. You could be upset at a situation. That's all fine. Those emotions are all good. But whining serves no purpose. It doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't solve the problem. Doesn't help anything. So don't do it, right? If you want to be sad and go sit in your room and just be sad for a little bit and figure out a way to get over it, cool. If you want to go try and fix whatever the problem is, fantastic, go do that. If you want to go do something else, right, play some game, whatever, okay. But whining, just complaining about whatever the issue is, isn't going to do anything for you. So from a logical perspective, which I am very much big on, is it doesn't serve a purpose. Now, I've said that for such a long time that I probably or definitely have not questioned it enough and thought about it enough. Because when I did today question it, very quickly I ran into an issue. As I've said on other videos, I believe that there is logic in, aside from a mental illness, there's logic in everything we do as humans. In that moment, it makes sense. In that moment, we run a cost-benefit analysis and we act in accordance with it. So for my son, myself, all of us that whine and complain at times, based on that principle, it would suggest there is a benefit. There's a reason in which we do it. There has to be. So that made me start thinking, what is the benefit of whining? What's the benefit of complaining? Does it actually do anything for us? In my son's case, why is he doing it? What's the reasoning? And you think about things like this most with anything. You start to come up with some answers right away, but I think you need to push. You need to challenge. You'll get a why. You'll get an answer to a why, but you need to go to the next level why, right? One of the obvious ones is, you whine, you complain because you want somebody else to validate what you're feeling. You want somebody else to tell you like, yeah, you should be angry. And that gives you some satisfaction, that validation. But the question comes back as to the next level why. Why does that make you feel any better that that person validated it? The issue is still the issue, right? If my boss tells me I have to work this weekend, then I'm angry about that. I complain to my wife and she says, yeah, that is absurd. It makes me feel better, but why? Right? I still have to work this weekend. So it seems problematic to me because on the one hand, there's this belief that there's no value, don't do it. And that seems to check out. But then on the other hand, there has to be, or else we wouldn't do it. So what is it, right? Part of it might be, much like with anger and yelling, there is some immediate short-term gratification or pleasure we get from complaining. Venting, right, is a phrase. There's something that's released in that makes us feel better to some extent. And there's probably some truth to that. I would believe that. That holds in some cases. But I don't think that explains it all, because there's plenty of times, myself, other people I observe, my son, where the whining will happen for a long time. And, if my boss tells me I have to work on a weekend, I might complain to my wife, I might whine to my brother or my friend or my mother. So how much validation do I need? How much venting do I need? It just doesn't seem to explain it all. And what it made me start to think about is, and this is, obviously I can only speak for myself, but I think there's some truth to it for my son and perhaps for others, is for me, when something like that happens, there's almost a sense of there's an imbalance, or there's an unfairness, there's an injustice that's happening. I feel like I'm being told I have to work over the weekend, and it's not just, it's not fair, right? I shouldn't have to work over the weekend. That's not, part of my job. I don't get paid extra for that. Whatever it might be, maybe it's not necessary. I don't see why it has to happen the weekend. Why can't it happen on Monday? There's some perceived slight or wrong or injustice that's happening. And what I think is that the complaining, the venting, the whining is almost a misguided plea to, I guess, the universe, maybe, I don't know, to try and balance that. Right? When I complain to my wife about working over the weekend, I find that I almost do it in a way of like, I'm trying to make a case for how unfair this is and how wrong it is. And somebody might say, yeah, right? Like you just want to feel like you're right in this situation, and that's the explanation. You just want to be right. And if you're right, it feeds your ego, it feeds whatever you need, and that's the benefit you're getting from it. But again, I don't see the logic in that. It doesn't change. Being right doesn't change. Just like I say to my son, it doesn't solve the problem. The problem still exists. So it almost seems, again, like there's this misguided view that, at least for me, that I'm making this case to try and, I don't know, hope that the universe will correct it, right? Like if I put it out there and I say it, that this is so clearly unfair, there's this blind belief that somehow things will even out. The balance will be shifted. The injustice will be righted. Now, I don't personally believe that, though. I mean, I do. I guess there's an inconvenient truth underneath that, which says that I must believe that to some extent, and I probably act that way in some other instances as well. But it would suggest that I somehow or in some way do believe that there should be a balance in the world, and furthermore, I guess that I can somehow will that into existence if I complain, if I whine. And that's in line, right? If I bring it back to my son who's whining, he's whining for that reason. If I really think about it, he's whining because he thinks that's going to fix the problem. He thinks that, hey, this is unfair. Like my toy broke, or I should be able to stay up late, or I should be able to watch more TV, so I'm going to whine because this is unfair, and I will whine, and then this should be fixed. And in theory, that happens enough and you realize it's not being fixed, so you should stop whining. But as me, as a 36-year-old man, I still complain. Why didn't I learn the lesson? Why didn't I recognize that, hey, this isn't solving anything. It's not changing anything. And I don't really have a good answer to that right now, other than that, perhaps I'll say the phrase of the word illogically, but there's some faulty logic, I guess I would say, in there for me. Perhaps I believe that there's some long-term play here where when these injustices happen, you complain about them, you whine about them, at some point it's going to be fixed, it's going to be corrected. At some point, the universe will balance out in some way. It's interesting, though, because as I say it now, I recognize like that doesn't make any sense. That's not going to happen. So perhaps this is one of those examples where it highlights the benefit of questioning these things and really challenging how you think about them. Because, again, for years, I've said this without a thought. And I still complain and I still whine, so it's somewhat hypocritical. But, why? Why am I doing it? Well, there's probably something deeply embedded in my cost-benefit analysis that's just flat out off. I still believe there's some benefit to whining. I think somehow magically, whether it be God or the universe or nature, whatever it is, somebody's going to right this ship. They're going to balance things. And probably the sooner I acknowledge it and then face it and accept that that's not the case, in theory, that's when I should stop whining and stop complaining, because it's not going to fix itself. I need to fix it. Right? If I don't like that my boss is telling me to have to work on the weekend, get a new job, get a new boss, right? That's the solution. Whining is not going to change it. So it's funny how something that I've been saying to my son for so long, I should have been listening to and following that advice. But we don't. Our minds work the way they work, and they develop these patterns and these grooves that they get into. And if you don't question them, if you don't challenge them, you fall victim to it just like anybody else.